This is the Bible story posters for lesson number 5 of the unit Covenant Keepers. Lesson number 5 is about Moses. And the subtitle of the lesson is Following Day by Day. And there's really not any specific verses or even chapters. This is lifted from all of Exodus and really beyond. So it's hard to read all of that. It just is a lot, but we're covering Moses and how Moses is one of those with which God makes this covenant, and then through Moses to the rest of the people. And so there are 2 Bible story posters, but I wanted to show these again just briefly because it's really best because it's progressive and one builds on the other, and the whole nature of God's covenant, his covenant keeping nature, is that he keeps that to 1,000 generations. And so that's the verse that we're internalizing, that we're helping the kids to remember. And so each one of these Bible story posters, they show that. And so reviewing Abraham, what started there, and then goes from Abraham to Isaac and Jacob, and then Joseph and all of the other brothers. And there's Isaac blessing Jacob, passing down the covenant blessing. And then there's Joseph, and this is all review. This one's from the previous lesson number 4, and all the brothers. And then how they ended up, Joseph ended up being sold to slavery in Egypt, and then all of the brothers and their families came down there. That's review. That's important to understand and to know and to reinforce, and all of them, how they got to that point, but especially reviewing that they were there in the land of Egypt. And then there's Joseph, and he's looking like an Egyptian because he's fully integrated in the society. He's like number 1 under Pharaoh himself, and that's a review of that lesson, and all the brothers kneeling down. And so reviewing that to get to today's lesson, or this particular lesson number 5, that's really important because it's all about the Exodus out of Egypt. And so there's a bit of a narrative in the lesson about how those people, 400 years of their descendants, they became many. And then it's a reflection back to what God told Abraham, that he would make his family great, as many as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. And 400 years later, that's what happened, and that's how it progressed to that point. So here's this giant group of this nation of Israel, and they are in the land of Egypt. But there was another of Pharaoh who arose who didn't know Joseph, and so eventually he was worried that they were going to overrun the place and take over his kingdom, so he kind of enslaved them. And so these are God's people that came as a blessing through Joseph and Joseph's gifts and ministry there, and under Pharaoh's blessing and protection. But then another Pharaoh many years later, over time. And that's what I'm going to show the kids. But God's covenant never changed, and God didn't give up on that. He's going to keep going. And so then you go through the whole thing. So when Moses, God calls Moses to bring his people out because they're slaves, and they're crying out to God, help us, and God sends Moses. And so that's another one. God is a covenant-keeping God, and he declares to Moses what he's going to do, and he's going to do it. He's going to keep his word because he does that every time. And so there's 2 Bible story posters. The first one is very dramatic, and this is the crossing of the Red Sea. And so you have the sea on either side. There's Moses, and then there's just millions of people that are all descendants, and they're all a part of the covenant because it traces back to Abraham. And then there's Moses standing there on the rock. He's got his staff. Now, there's a pillar of fire there. And what's hard to tell in the detail from a distance, and you can let the kids see it, is these are the millions of people, of the descendants of Israel, and then there's Pharaoh's army behind. And the pillar of fire is between them. And that's the moment we chose with this Bible story poster. It's very dramatic. And so these people had, in order to receive the ultimate finished product of the covenant and the promised land, they had to follow day by day. And that's what Moses led them to do. And literally in the wilderness, they did that for 40 years. And at night, if God wanted them to move, he put a pillar of fire and they followed that. During the day, there was a pillar of cloud and they would follow that. And when Pharaoh's army was coming to get them and they changed their mind after letting them go, then the pillar of fire stuck there in between. And so that's pretty cool. And then it was after that, the second one, where God gives them the Ten Commandments. And this is an expression written down of some of the expectations for the people in the covenant. And there's the finger of God. That's pretty cool. The Bible actually says that the first set of Ten Commandments, God actually wrote them with his finger in the stone. And there's Moses. He's got one of them right there, 2 tablets. There's one, and there's God writing the other one. And there he is up at night on the mountain. And so that's pretty fun to show that too. So these two, they show 2 really specific and dramatic moments in God leading them out to finally pursue and arrive at the ultimate expression of that covenant, the promised land. Well, not the ultimate, because that was really Jesus. And so after you go through that, we need to point again to him and say that, for all of these people now, God is going to keep that covenant. And through all of them, eventually Jesus would come and be a blessing to the whole world. And that's how that God would keep his covenant and bless everybody through Abraham's family. Anyway, that's a lot to cover, but just skim over it the best that you can. Also, that's the Bible story poster for lesson number 5 of the Covenant Keepers.